They told them not to speak, not to cry, not to think. But in that moment, when a man in a white coat asked if the two boys were twins, their mother, who barely understood the language, squeezed their hands and answered with a single word, "Yes." That one word saved their lives. The boys' names were Daniel and Elias. Daniel was 12, Elias just 10. They were brothers, but not twins. Still, in the brutal logic of Auschwitz, truth was a fragile thing. A mother's lie, spoken under duress, became a passport to life. She didn't speak German well, but she understood enough. That day, standing on the ramp at Auschwitz-Birkenau, she looked into the eyes of Josef Mengele and chose to lie. It was the spring of 1944. Daniel, Elias, and their mother had been taken from Hungary with thousands of others. Shoved into packed cattle cars, they were told it was relocation, that they'd be together, that it was temporary. Daniel remembered packing his satchel with socks, a book, and Elias's wooden horse. Elias cried when they left their dog behind. When the train doors finally opened, the stench of burning and iron flooded their lungs. Guards screamed, dogs barked. They had arrived. Everything became a blur, a nightmare in motion. Men to one side, women to another. The children didn't know where to stand. Then a man in a pristine white coat approached, calm, methodical. It was Mengele. He stopped before the boys. "Zwillinge?" he asked. "Twins." Their mother hesitated. She didn't understand the word. A prisoner beside her whispered frantically, "Say yes. Say they're twins. Say yes if you want them to live." She said yes. Before Daniel and Elias could say goodbye, they were pulled from her. That moment, her arms reaching out, disappearing behind the guards, was burned into Daniel's memory. They never saw her again. The boys were taken to a separate part of the camp, the Kinderbaracke, the children's barracks. This was where the so-called twins were held for medical experiments. Some children were real twins. Others, like Daniel and Elias, were lucky fakes. They were shaved, tattooed, and photographed. Then came the endless procedures, measuring bones, collecting blood, injecting chemicals, taking samples of skin and saliva. They were treated as test subjects, not children. No explanations were given. Disobedience meant punishment. Crying could mean disappearance. One boy vanished after refusing a blood test. Another came back from surgery with fresh stitches and dead eyes. He never spoke again. But amid the horror, bonds began to form. The children clung to each other, not just out of fear, but out of instinct. They held one another when the cold seeped through the walls. They shared crusts of bread. They whispered prayers. They became each other's only source of warmth and humanity. Daniel and Elias, despite not being twins, became inseparable. Their features blurred together in the shadows. Their suffering became synchronized. There was one man, Erno, a Jewish prisoner in charge of record-keeping. When he saw the boys, he stared at them for a long time. "You don't look like twins," he muttered. Daniel froze. Would the lie be exposed? Erno wrote in the book anyway. His voice was flat, but his eyes gentle. "From today," he said, "you are." That moment, a silent act of defiance with a pen, may have saved their lives once more. Time passed strangely in Auschwitz. Days became indistinguishable. Hunger gnawed at their bones. Cold made their fingers numb. Hope was a flickering candle. Sometimes Daniel forgot they weren't actually twins. He and Elias were thinner, paler. Their eyes looked the same. Their nightmares were shared. Their prayers became one. Then one morning, silence. No barking dogs, no shouting guards, no smoke from the chimneys. Word spread through the barracks. The guards had fled. The Russians were approaching. It was over. The gates of Auschwitz stood open for the first time. Daniel and Elias walked out hand in hand, just as they had walked in, but now they were barely recognizable, two walking skeletons in tattered rags. Still, they were alive. They searched desperately for their mother, their father, cousins, anyone, but no names matched, no faces appeared, no one answered. They were alone. In the weeks that followed, the boys were taken to an orphanage, then separated through adoption. Elias moved to Canada. Daniel remained in Hungary before eventually moving to the United States. They built lives, families, homes filled with laughter, but the shadow of Auschwitz never left. For decades, they didn't speak of the camp, not even to their children. Then one day, Elias called. "Let's tell the story," he said. We're the only ones left who remember." And so they did. They told how their mother had lied to Mengele to save them, how a whisper from a prisoner had prompted that lie, how a stranger named Erno confirmed it without question. They shared what it was like to live in a place where names were numbers, where children were studied like insects, where hope was a dangerous thing to have. They told of hunger, of silence, of snowflakes falling on razor wire. They told the truth, beginning with a lie. Their story was not one of heroism, they insisted, but of survival, of luck, of timing, of human connection in inhuman conditions. People who heard it wept, asked how they endured. Daniel would say, "We didn't endure because we were brave. We endured because we had each other." They never found their mother's name on any list. She vanished like so many others, into smoke, into silence. But her voice, her courage, her instinct to protect lived on in two boys who should have died, but didn't, because of a lie. Daniel was never a twin, but in Auschwitz, for 1 year, he became one. And that made all the difference. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Voices from the Camps and help us keep these memories alive. Every voice we share is one step closer to making sure history is never forgotten. New stories every week, inspired by real survivors. Hit the bell so you never miss a voice that must be heard.